and that degree has to be approved by a group. Now please go back 40 years. Were there any professional standards in aromatherapy? No. So aromatherapy itself had to develop those standards. Now that was not only in medicine, but also understanding the relationship of the other things that go with it. For example, as I said, right back in the Egyptian days, apparently perfumery seemed to work quite well for a lot of their illnesses, didn't it? So, are we talking about perfume, or are we talking about aromatherapy, or what are we talking here? And it's precisely the point that we should have an understanding of what we want. What is our purpose? If our purpose, and I'm 100% behind the last speaker, is to make a floor polish that smells of lavender, then what is the significance of that? That is quite different to something else to be used where your intent in a healing modality is applied with a plant that had at one time a living structure. Now to suggest that there isn't an interface is to deny totally that your computer works. Because all your computer does is store on a microchip information which is little more than a vibration. Once you have grasped that, then you can move from a method of agriculture, which is organics, into the question of what is vitality and what is not vitality. You see, we're creating wonderful robots at the moment, aren't we? Incredibly lifelike, but they are not alive. And artificial intelligence is still, at the end of the day, artificial. What is sensism? Well, sensism begins, it's a strange English word, it's not invented. I'm sure the translator would have had difficulty with this one. Oxford University, combined with one of the major British companies called ICI, or Imperial Chemical Industry, to review the age we now live in. And they said that during these coming decades, we would begin to understand how humanity works. We had in medicine begun to look at everything in a very mechanical sense, wasn't it? And basically, we still do. Now that's absolutely perfect. If you have had a car accident, it's no good if you're lying there bleeding with a broken leg saying, well, I prefer a homeopathic remedy. Doesn't work. What you have to do is to take the best from orthodox medicine and then do what you wish with afterwards, because as we've seen, well-being is not the same thing as having an accident. It's completely different. So, sensism was given a definition. It's the ethical doctrine that feeling is the only criteria for what is good. Now here we're not talking about hedonism, but it is saying that feeling, we might say mood, is actually critical to the century that we live in. Now feelings have come very much to the fore. Again, our first speaker was talking about feeling. That lecture, I would suggest, wouldn't be given 50 years ago. Not in the way that it was given. So feeling has come very much to the fore. Now whether that has been applied in paint technology, in motor car technology, Agnes last night was talking about the choice that she had in motor car and was able to choose. So these choice and feelings which were generated, yes, that's a surprise, isn't it? I'm sure she would like something much pinker or bluer or something that currently the blacker Volvo, I think it was. Okay. So sensism has invaded many aspects of our life. But aromatherapy is basically to do with sensism. It's a holistic approach. If we take our sense of smell, it's missing from aromatherapy. See, very often we're talking about X molecule does Y. That's orthodox medicine. But smell is nothing about that. Smell is individual. If you think about the company that surely represents Fragrant Earth, they only use pure essential oils as per Marco was talking about. And they're not making any money on it. They do this as a service for therapy, because we have a completely separate business, which I'm particularly involved with, in perfume and fragrance. So in other words, I work mostly with the fragrance industry, Louis Vuitton Group. If anybody knows the brand Elemis or any of those big brands, it's all to do with our production of essential oils. Because I try to use those brands to take organic material. Because organic material, at the very worst, is good for the planet. Doesn't mean to say that organic is better than everything. You know, organic wine can be terrible. Organic essential oils can be terrible. But at least it's doing something for the planet, and at least if you have organic standards, you are supporting poorer, or third world countries, and part of organic standards is to do with the money that people receive, so that they can continue and improve and so on. So there we have somebody smelling. Contemplation, meditation, pleasure, all sorts of things. But what is going on is feeling. She is feeling. Feeling what? She's feeling aroma, using her brain, which is not under rational control. And that really is the issue. If we take ordinary well-being and aromatherapy, we have a cleaning of the wound function, we understand that, providing we don't use too much necrotic material. But we are essentially trying to create an environment for healing. I've said Cinderella sleeps best at home. What does that mean? It means that going home to your own bed, sometimes to your own space, is the best thing that can happen. Many, many times. And that's about, in other words, feeling. The hospital bed is much more sterile, supposedly better for you, but all you want to do is to get home and feel better. Interesting, isn't it? Okay. So, you notice there I put our senses interact with our intelligence. Wellness is homeostasis. We have that all the time. That's what we want to achieve. All those bits up our spine, you know, trying to balance ourselves, all those nerves. Actually, it's satisfying or filling the senses. So, sensory assaults, look at that. Everybody enjoying the atmosphere in here today? Nice and cool? Yes? Going through the system of recirculated air? Yes? Full of vitality, is it all a little molecule? And what are you going to do from here? Having all nodded your heads and saying that you're happy, thank you very much. Please hotel, you're doing your best. But one of the things we're going to like to do is to go out of here into the fresh air and smell all the petrol fumes, because even that's better. It's about feeling, isn't it, again? It's about the sense of well-being. I put at the bottom, touch and smell are marginalised, because that's the way it is these days. Sight is dominant, isn't it? It's unfortunate that it is. But if you go back to tradition, was sight dominant? Not at all. People used to use their sense of smell far more than today. Sense is the key to emotion. Emotion, the source of well-being, and well-being is the focus of health. That's a good way of thinking about it. Now, emotion is often used to say, it's like a bad word. It's used like, well, she's being emotional, he's being hysterical, you know, that sort of thing, isn't it? But take and break those English words down. Take the E off. What have you got? Movement. What does E stand for in physics? Energy. So do you get the point? Now this transitional point is between not only the plant, the essential oil, which I would describe as energetic, because the molecules are energetic. I'll give you an example of something that was said earlier about very, very small volumes. 1-thioterpineol, which you'll find in grapefruit, the consensus is if you had 10 mil of that, spread it evenly through the world, we would all smell grapefruit. So that's why it's important to talk in terms of whole oils, why it's important to look in terms of the front molecule and the back molecule. Not all about commercialism. And that's what the smaller producer can do, is give you this whole oil. You familiar with those? Notice here, please, just for my benefit, the silver senses in decline: smell, taste, and touch. Do you know I've noticed that? And it's a shame, because I'm losing, as a perfumer, my ability to perfume. Because I know that I'm not as sharp as I used to. Now, how many of you think about older folk who lose their sense of taste? They do. They go off food. And yet taste is smell. I say it advisedly because we know it's sweet, sour, and that's, 3 or 4 of them. But every other nuance is smell. Retro smelling. Sick buildings. Is that to do with smell? Well, yes, because you were born to live in a fragrant earth. You were meant to walk through flowers. You were meant to smell hay. You were meant to smell the cows in the barn, or if you were a peasant in next to Peru. You live in a smelly environment. And people, when they talk about fragrance-free, no such thing really. It's an inability to smell.